Okay. Well, welcome everyone uh, for this presentation on Gemini and Purnarvasu. Uh, I think that last week we had a wonderful introduction to the topic because we were given examples of how the on the inner plane, uh, the dynamics of the inner plane actually determine the outward results. And we're often taught that in theosophy, but we're given various practical examples about what we're thinking and feeling, our motivations, how they actually affect the dynamics of external events. And this is, when we consider the zodiac, this is a critical thing to take into consideration because we're talking about all of these invisible influences that pervade space and that forces and intelligences that we have correspondences and correlations with. And certainly when we consider the zodiac, we're talking about those kind of things. Also, this week is not only the summer solstice, but it is also the death anniversary of Sri Raghavan Iyer on June 20th. And one of the traditions in theosophy is to always honor our teachers in their death anniversaries. But of course, in a way, it's a curious thing because they're not dead, right? They're on the present. So it's a curious thing, but it does point to that particular manifestation, phenomenal manifestation in life, that sacrifice that they gave to help on the evolution of humanity. Now I'm going to share my screen here. So this is one way that Gemini would appear in the sky when we're looking at it. And Pollux and Castor here are Purnarvasu, that aspect of Gemini, which is the nakshatra, the lunar nakshatra. Now, this diagram, you see these dotted lines, it's one way of mapping out the area which is included in the constellation of Gemini. And as I've been told by Michelle Christie, Castor and Pollux are, that nakshatra is 20 degrees into Gemini, and it extends into 3 degrees into Cancer. And that will be the lunar aspect, and this whole thing will be the solar aspect of of our conversation. Now, this gives you a view. It's from Sky and Telescope, which, by the way, is a wonderful way to see what's going on astronomically in the sky, especially what's visible. So this was a diagram for June 7th and 9th at dusk. And there was actually one night in Santa Barbara where you could actually see this because it's been overcast for months. But there you see how one of the portrayals of Gemini is that it's the gateway to the temple of humanity. And when you see Pollux and Castor in this pose above the horizon, it actually looks like that. Oh, where's that? Now, I thought it was interesting to just look at the astronomical aspects of these stars. I was really surprised to find out that Castor, which appears as 1, is actually 6 stars, or 3 binaries. So Castor C, this is a projection of 2 stars bound by a gravitational rotation. here's a projection of Castor B, and here's a projection of Castor A. So Castor is actually 3 binary stars. You know, I don't know if through knowledge and correspondence if you can come up with something with that. Whereas Pollux is a very old star. It's used up all its hydrogen, and it's evolved into a giant orange star with 2 times the mass of the sun. And it actually has a planet, which has a mass 2.3 times that of Jupiter. Now, if we look at conventional astrology, the Gemini is characterized as an ever-changing current. And the ruling planet is Mercury, which is the planet of communication, but also for students of theosophy, it's correlated with Hermes Buddha, active spiritual wisdom. And conventionally, Gemini personality has the qualities of a quick wit, adaptability, curiosity, and sociability, intellectual explorers. But the best use would that be seeking spiritual wisdom. Now, in this presentation, that will be Gemini means the twin. And the twins that we'll be focusing on will be, for the most part, from Greek mythology, but you can find other twins and other traditions. But we found it very interesting to focus on the Pollux and Castor myth in Greek mythology. And Pollux is the child of Leda and Zeus. Zeus had seduced the queen of Sparta, Leda, as a swan. And his sister is the famed Helen of Troy. Now, you know, this sounds kind of gross, you know, perversion or something like that, being seduced by a swan. But H.P. Blavatsky in The Secret Doctrine points out that the symbolism of the swan is Kalahansa. This is the swan inside and outside of time. And it points to our ultimate spiritual identity, both as consciousness in time and consciousness outside of time. And that is interesting that consciousness then comes in, and it's kind of the overbrooding. You can think of the swan as overbrooding our existence, humanity's existence, and each human being's existence. And I don't know if you remember, but Kalahansa is that mythic swan that can separate milk from water, which points to Pollux's spiritual discrimination. Now, we're at the same night that Leda was impregnated by Zeus, her husband, the king of Sparta, Tyndareus, also impregnated her. And so that the twins were born, one immortal and the other mortal. And by the way, Castor's sister is Clytemnestra, the wife of Agamemnon, which is, you know, another complicated story. One of the quotes of the week in the Aquarian Almanac is from Sri Raghavan Iyer. And it says that the surest sign of the Logos in the cosmos, the God in man, is the enormous latent capacity through the power of sound to create something that is truly magical. And we might mention that magic, Sri Raghavan was all about magic. Having been a student of his from 1971 until his death, everything that was associated with Ragavan was magic. But here we're particularly point to the power of sound, which points also to, remember, Kalahansa, in the voice of the silence, is correlated with AUM. So it is the word, the pranava. And here in the symbol that appeared on the journal Hermes from 1975 to 1989, I believe, you could think of Kalahansa as this winged bird, and then gives birth to this egg or spiritual sun from which emanate the various powers and forces in dual nature. And remember, the twins have the dual nature, which are always locked together, but always working together, and yet at the same time dual. Now, in the myth, the Greek myth, Pollux finds his brother dying and appeals to his divine father to let him perish too. But Theo says, you can't die because you're of an immortal race. And so he gives them this gift. Well, they will share each other's life. So Pollux gives a portion of his immortality to Castor, and the twins live alternately, one during the day and the other at night in the heavenly abodes. Now, symbolically, we know that theosophically, the human being is associated with the principle of manas, or mind. There's immortal mind, and then there is its emanation, which is called the lower manas, which is the same as the higher manas. It's an emanation of it, but it has the capacity to interact with various grades of differentiated matter, and then in some sense become separate. So during the day or during one's incarnation, one is mortal. But at night, when we go into deep dreamless sleep, and when we die, we return to our higher nature of Pollux. Now, there's a whole series of quotes here from the article Gemini by Helen Wahlberg. And I wanted to clarify something that, a lot of what I say may be a reminder. But when we say that Helen Wahlberg wrote these articles, there's something that one needs to understand. She wrote them for the journal Hermes. And the journal Hermes, everyone that was associated with that and the articles that occurred in it, they were all part of the Hermes current. And when you participated in that, you were beyond yourself. You were your better self, or whatever you want to do it, but you were exalted. And so it was Helen, but under the inspiration of the current that Ragavan Iyer directed. Now, I think we with this, that Castor is the mortal man, the animal man. Another way of looking at this is, the lighting up of manas, where you had the human form, the human animal, and then the incarnation by the manasa of the informing principle of manas that links the monad, Atma Buddhi, the spiritual eternal being, with the mortal form. So lower man becomes conscious, and higher man can behold the world through his less favored brother. Thus, Castor symbolizes the egg-born third race humanity, unconscious until awakened to monastic awareness by the informing God Pollux. Now, this reminds you also of Vedantic teaching of where Purusha becomes active through Prakriti. So Gemini represents the force of both the higher and the lower mind, which when ideally combined, result in an airy and mercurial balance of self-consciousness. And the duality symbolized by and inherent in Gemini suggests the dynamic unity of mind. Here's the thing, the crucible of the Aquarian age. So how is that duality symbolized by Gemini, how is that the crucible of the Aquarian age? When the two brothers are separated, Kamamanus is the calculating mind and it apes its twin. So you get into fantasy, and if one examines what passes through one's consciousness, it's surprising how much one avoids the hard realities, the suffering that goes on in humanity, and through fantasy. You know, I mean, movies, distractions, all kinds of ways that we deal with that. And one of the things that this student was particularly attracted me to Sri Raghavan Iyer. When I was first heard him, I realized that here was somebody who could actually make a difference in the suffering of humanity. And so I would do whatever I could, little bit I could, to help out. Now, Pollux, the higher mind, Buddhimanas, is indifferent to all but universal truths. It synthesizes the mathematical harmonics of the world of change into one fundamental vibration, which precedes and pervades every manifestation and transcends every level of insight, each of which becomes a step on the stairway to pure spirit. So here again, really, it's like a reference back to the higher mind as the vibration of Kalahamsa, spiritual identity, one with all. So when the Kama-manas is wedded to Buddhi-manas, the relational side is weaned, all its batana, all of our attractions, magnetic and electrical connection with hosts of elementals is weakened in the astral light. Our thirst to embody a form and have a name, to exist as an external entity, is weakened. And then Buddhi-manas can manifest in the world. And then you have this quote for the week from Hermes, which came from this article. Gemini represents the realignment of the inverted mind. So that's that critical polarity, the realignment, the crucible of Gemini. So depending on how, when you look at it, male and female, or positive and negative, what has to happen is that Kama-manas has to become passive in relation to Buddhi-manas, so that Buddhi-manas can be active through Kama-manas. In a way, Kama-manas is, at its best, is just a reflection of Buddhi-manas. So when brought together in fraternal friendship, lower mind is purified so that it picks up and reflects only the colors emitted by the higher mind. It's really a beautiful idea. And in the article, it talks about the higher mind being like a diamond clear light. And then it picks up that light in the lower mind and refracts it like an opal of boundless color. So that's like the magic mind, where lower Mars becomes the magic mind. It connects up with hosts of positive forces and intelligence in nature, and works with nature and helps on evolution with her. So the point of this quote is that ideally we should not separate our consciousness from our higher consciousness. They're one and the same. So one has to separate. It's kind of like separating the light from all the things that it shines upon. So we're a spectator of our subjectivity, but that subjectivity is objective to our perception. Now, we bring in another analogy here about Adam and Cain and Abel. Adam being a collective symbol of mankind, at first androgynous, like in the early third root race, and then divided into male and female, or female, or male and female Cain and Abel. So the female aspect, symbolically, in this interpretation, is killed because it enters into generation, enters into incarnation. So there's that sacrificial aspect of the higher Manas as it enters into incarnation. And you think about the immortal mind is not born, because whatever is born will die. Whereas the lower mind, entering into the field of generation, is born, but only in a reflected sin. Just like you could say the moon rises, reflects itself in the ocean, and then sets and disappears, but it still exists. So this just talks about that myth in the Bible about Adam and Eve has to do with this third root race. And the unfortunate, or the not unfortunate, it's actually a requirement of evolution that there be this separation and the the struggle that results. Now, the Nidana, one of the causal chains of reincarnation that fuels the cycle of rebirth, death and rebirth, is the Nidana of Vijnana, which is I consciousness, a collective term for all our mental states. And here in the article, it says, raises fundamental questions like, why do we think that matter exists? What is the cause of the illusion of objective consciousness? These are profound metaphysical questions. It's not that I have any answer to these. But you could see that if you have the capacity to withdraw into deep dreamless sleep, or the state of consciousness associated with that, and remain awake, you might have an answer. So here, evolution requires the full descent, and the separate ego enters into a long passage through the realm of imputed reality where unreal imagination has full sway. And the memory of the divine twins is barely discerned. And the struggle between reality and its shadow begins. So now I'm going to move into more of a focus on, instead of Gemini, we'll be focused on the lunar nakshatra of Purnarvasu, which is associated with divine descent and is considered to be doubly good. Now, here's a quote from the website maitreyaacademy.org. And it's one way of expressing what HBB talked about in the key and what Crosby and Judge talked about elsewhere. That the secret society of sages, the Brotherhood of Mahatmas, that guides human progress, periodically sends forth one of their own to sound afresh the divine philosophy and exemplify the spiritual life in all its richness and mystery. Such an enlightened spiritual teacher articulates eternal but forgotten truths in ingenious ways, adopting modalities that inspire the mind, release soul perception, and cut through the froth of history and the miasma of the age. Now, this is true of all divine teachers, and each age has its particular challenges. Now, Purnarvasu Nakshatra is the birth star of Lord Rama over 1 million years ago. To show how it's correlated with divine descent. So it's derived from Purnarvasu, which means return, renewal, restoration, and repetition. And you could think of this as referring to the cycle of avataric descent. And avatar is such a complicated word or concept, or to understand it. Where, you know, Krishna says, if you understand that, my birth, you understand everything. So that pretty much tells you how complicated it is to talk about avatar. The simplest way is that it has to do with the descent of divine being into the world. But it also has to do with the ascent to divinity. Now, this is from Bhavani Shankar's Doctrine of the Bhagavad Gita. He quotes Krishna, "Many births of mine have passed as well as thine, O Arjuna. All these I know. Thou knowest them not, O harasser of thy foes." So Bhavani says the many births referred to in the verse include not only his human avatars, but also the many births of the great Jivan Mukta, who had absorbed himself in Bhagavan, and who, owing to the infinite love and compassion he had developed in himself for humanity, had generated an impulse in Ishvara to incarnate himself for the good of the human race. But, you know, salutations to Bhavani Shankar. Right? He is so remarkable in his comments on the Gita. His site goes very deep. But here you see that the avatar involves descent, but it also involves ascent. It involves the sacrificial ascent of the human being, the human ego, the caster, the human divine aspiring mind, trying to unite with Pollock over millenniums till one is reunited with the celestial spiritual, and then out of great love and concern for humanity generates an impulse for the good of humanity. Now, in 1975, Hermes, November, there was an article called The Seven Impulsion. And it told about that not only is in the 1800s, was there an impulsion by H.P. Blavatsky, by the Mahatmas, to help on the spiritual evolution of humanity, but it actually started back with Tsongkhapa. And then that this impulse, in the last quarter of every century, was repeated. And just like in physical life, you have round numbers and then you have the actual numbers. So here you see some of the actual numbers of those who were involved in those seventh impulsions. And if you think about those time slides, you'll realize there's a host of other beings that were involved. The seventh impulsion was 1963 to 2000. For those of us that are alive in 1963, to me, that made total sense. Now, at the end of this article, you'll find this quote that 14 times 7 years and 7 months after the birth of HPV, as well as 3 times 9 years and 9 months after the Aquarian age commenced, when the disk of the sun crossed the galactic equator. Now, the galactic equator is the plane of the Milky Way. And the sun, in its journey around the galaxy, does a kind of sine wave. So periodically it's going above, and then it crosses the galactic equator and goes below, and then it goes back up. So that's what it means about the sun crossing the galactic equator. And entered this constellation of Purnarvasu. And an event took place on Earth under the aegis of that asterism, containing the key to the 1975 cycle. This is everything and nothing in the time-honored code language of the wise men of the East. Now, a superficial calculation of this leads to March 1930 from HPV's birthday. Is it March 12th? Well, it depends on how you calculate a month. And then if you go from the Aquarian age, well, there's no consensus about when the Aquarian age began. But as Theosophists in Hermes and in the Aquarian Almanac, you'll find that Sri Raghavan said it began on June 19th, 1902. And we know that those with spiritual vision can see the change in color between one epoch and another. And this also comes to March 1930, but is it the 19th of March? Well, that would be a different day than the 12th, wouldn't it? Now, Raghavan was born on March 10th, 1930. And many of us in Santa Barbara thought that referred to his birth because of the fact that we were swimming and breathing and living and thinking in the 1975 current and that impulsion, and also trying to understand that Hermes current that he talked about that goes at least back to prehistory in Egypt, at least 75,000 years ago. The tradition of Hermes Trismegistus into Pythagoras and Plato, into the Arab mystics and philosophers, to the Italian Renaissance, the English Renaissance, to the American Transcendentalists. That current, that spiritual current, could go all the way back to third race humanity, for all I know. Now, this is just like I say, reminders. I take it that you're aware of the MaitreyaAcademy.org. This, you can see the menu here that is on that site. And we, that is, the members of this little community that takes up the Aquarian themes, are working towards civitas humana, the city of man, or the brotherhood of humanity, the city that we are all citizens of in a Platonic sense, insofar as we choose to put our sights on the spiritual welfare of humanity. Now, there's a biography of Raghavan for those who want to know more about his life. But also what you can't find elsewhere is some audio recordings, some actual talks that have been given by Raghavan. And then there's a whole series of articles on Aquarian civilization. Now, you could go a long way just studying MaitreyaAcademy.org. So here's a quote from there that the website is consecrated to presenting the luminous teachings of Group Dividya by Sri Raghavan Iyer. Profound spiritual philosopher, a luminous purveyor of timeless wisdom, of spiritual teachers across continents and epochs, a wise magician of the heart. His brilliant writings and spiritually penetrating talks were given from 1963 to 1995. And those teachings embody the very spirit of the Maitreya Academy, which is to cultivate spiritual intellectuality, which is another way of talking about elevating the Manas and Buddhi of the race the way that William Kwan Judge put it. And that is here portrayed as a triadic synthesis of soul intuition and personal thought and universal ethics, giving birth to true magnanimity and uttermost compassion in the genuine seeker and willing servant of universal justice. Raghavan emphasized over and over again that Mahatmas are servants. We should understand that Mahatmas are servants. His work was published in the Group Dividya 3-volume set, which is available on Amazon. Also, a lot of the writings from the 1975 cycle, as you probably know, are available on theosophytrust.org. This is from another article by Helen on Jupiter, which happens to be the ruling planet of Purnarvasu, whereas the ruling planet of Gemini is Mercury. The ruling planet of Purnarvasu is Jupiter. The supreme virtues of wise judgment and benevolent will belonging to Jupiter can stimulate the higher, expansive mind of human beings and illuminate the lesser mental vesture even now in the dawning of the Aquarian age, presided over by Purnarvasu. Now, this again, the realignment of the inverted mind is here. And also you think about Jupiter as Zeus, which, has also, like so many symbols, has a higher and lower aspect. Plus, HPV says every symbol has 7 keys, returned 7 times, so you have at least 49 interpretations. So we'll end with another quote from the Almanac from HPV, which immortality is but one's unbroken consciousness. So that's our immortal self. It's continuous, unbroken, unborn. So Raghavan, in another article that appeared in that issue of Hermes magazine called The Candle of Vision, repeats this instruction that we've also been given elsewhere. In the beginning, if one would like to test oneself, one may go to sleep with one idea and see if it can be maintained intact throughout sleep, so that one wakes up with that idea. In this way, one can attain an increasing measure of continuity of consciousness in daily life. Also, that the only way a person ever learns is, in Gandhi's phrase, by making experiments with truth in daily encounter. So that completes my part of the presentation.
There it is. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Robert. What a wonderful presentation. We are going to open up for questions. And I see that Judy Salzman has her hand up. Hi there, Judy.
Yes. Hello, Robert. I just have a question about Castor and Pollux. If Clytemnestra was the son of Zeus, I mean the daughter of Zeus and immortal, and
Judy, Clytemnestra was the daughter of Tyndareus. She's the daughter of Leda and Tyndareus.
okay.
So she's mortal, whereas Helen supposedly is the daughter of Zeus. And yeah.
Well, isn't that such a person is a demigod then?
Yes, right.
Ellen, yeah.
Right.
Which means that they're not going to live forever, but they have paranormal powers.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't quite clear on the meaning of this in relation to Castor and Pollux, because it seems their main relation is as twins, that they're even in the universe. And so really what is the significance of this in the relation to Castor and Pollux? I think it's quite also very interesting that there's a 6-star system associated with this, and eventually maybe we'll grow to that.
Well, the simplest, I mean, like I said, it's multifaceted, like all mythology is. But the one way, and the way HPB puts it in The Secret Doctrine, is that that Pollux lends his, or our immortal mind, the reincarnating ego, lends his immortality to Castor, the mortal human being, whenever the mortal being, Castor, is sympathetic to the needs of the soul and not into the gratification of desires or the inflation of a separate sense of self, working for one's own good to the detriment of others, that kind of thing, which is so common. So that's one way. Another way she puts it is that the myth can refer to way back third race humanity, which was androgynous, male and female. And then with the separation of sexes, you had the incarnation of the Kumara, who lit up or engaged the immortal mind of the human being, so that the immortal could see through the eyes of the mortal and gather experience therefrom, so that a pure spiritual being has it's to me, it's a mystery. But a pure spiritual being has no merit. It's only by passing through and gaining experience through the eyes of mortality that one gains merit or virtue that can eventually blossom into the bodhisattva.
Beautiful. I had a question, Robert. You spoke of Jupiter, which was surprising to this student, given that we're accustomed to thinking of Gemini connected with the planet Mercury. And so regarding this process that you spoke of on one of your earliest slides about kama manas and the higher mind and the sort of change in direction of kama manas toward the higher self. I wondered how the planet Jupiter, given that this student has been told that the planet Jupiter symbolizes the guru, the guiding force of the universe. So here thinking that Gemini is definitely regarding Mercury, how does Jupiter play into this process of the kama manas turning toward higher manas? And is there a process that turns kama manas into devotion? So devotion and the existence of the Sadguru, which is supposedly symbolized by Jupiter. I'm just wondering if in this process, how that turning point for kama manas comes about.
Now, one thing we have to be clear about is that Jupiter, there are many, many stars in the constellation of Gemini. Two of those stars, Castor and Pollux, those are just two of many stars. Now, those two stars taken together form a lunar correlation, a nakshatra, in which Jupiter is the ruling planet. Mercury is the ruling planet of Gemini. So we move from the solar into the lunar. So you don't want to confuse those two, because one has to do with the zodiac, the sun going through all the signs of the zodiac, and the other has to do with the moon going through them, and it goes through them very quickly.
I see. That's bad.
It has its own set of mansions.
Wow.
But feel free to jump in here, Michelle, if you're listening.
It just gets.
Well, the only thing I would add is, Jupiter expands anything that it touches, whereas Saturn restricts it. And also Jupiter is associated with Sagittarius, which is directly opposite Gemini. And Jupiter there is all about the expansion of ideas and of science and religion and philosophy. And it's really about engaging the higher mind there. And so I think that you can correlate here Mercury being related to buddhi, and also really buddhi manas, really. And so the influence of Jupiter there, I think, is going to expand anything, just like, a teacher expands on one. They're there to help correct and help the student sift and learn discernment, which is also a quality of buddhi there. But they're also helping to expand the mind and the heart and the general direction.
Thank you so much.
And, it's Jupiter's a kind of a classic example of, Jupiter's Zeus, right? If you think about the myth of Prometheus, especially as it's described in the Secret Doctrine, Zeus is a cruel tyrant. He's the one that chains Prometheus to the mountain and has the vulture eat out his liver every day. So there's that aspect, where you get different. But then other parts of mythology, you get Zeus as the supreme deity, the supreme spirit. And that, in that sense, it can be associated with Kalahansa. So you really have to look at the context and the correlations that are being made. But Jupiter can be a synthetic force and an amplifying force.
Thank you so much. Kirk has a question. You've got to unmute, Kirk.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Robert, for a really fine presentation. It was such a good question that I just wanted to add a couple of other details and because even though you linked it up to Jupiter, the fundamental question seemed to be about how Kama Manas is realigned. And is it through devotion that Kama Manas is realigned? And I think that is so critical, especially in regards to Helen's article, because she calls the symbol of Gemini, which is two verticals, two columns with a horizontal, like a header over the top, and then also a threshold at the bottom. And she calls it the portal of humanity, but she also calls it the portal to the path. And so, fundamentally, a theosophical student would say that the inverted mind is realigned through the path without undergoing the stages and trials and rigors and discipline of the spiritual path. You're not going to get a true realignment of the lower mind. And but this idea of it being the portal of entrance. And what are we told, of course, is that the first step is to learn to live for the benefit of humanity. And that's probably why Helen calls it the portal of humanity. So it's that fundamental realignment. Instead of working for self, one is working for the whole. And just one other point, that's the beginning point, right? Without that fundamental shift in motivation and of identity, because it's both really, everything's going to be an inversion. Without that fundamental shift, everything's going to be backwards. One's going to still be working on behalf of the separative self and separative consciousness. So, but then just as a final point, I've always been struck by this in Judge's article on in the Ocean of Theosophy on Kama. He says that even Jesus or Buddha had to take a vow in some life to serve humanity or some part of it, and to keep that vow alive throughout successive lives. And that in itself, that devotion is the commitment to the realignment of the lower mind, right? That's the motive power, the service of humanity that gives one the strength to endure all those rigors of the path that one is going to encounter. And seems to be that fundamental shift from personal desire to impersonal desire. So anyway, thank you for that question.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
Kirk, you remind me of with this idea of devotion. It always struck me that there was only one thing that H.P. Blavatsky said that was her virtue. And her virtue was that she never doubted her master and her complete loyalty to her master, her guru. And you could also look at Castor and Pollux as the relationship between the guru and the disciple. So that, and that it's especially relevant because the guru is the self. The guru exemplifies one's own self, the spiritual self and spiritual identity. So especially this was then amplified in the 1975 cycle, and people are catching on that in the spiritual life, even though there are fake gurus, in the spiritual life, one is connected with the guru, with a spiritual teacher, and there is a mysterious and magical and really very difficult relationship to articulate that Plato tries to articulate that in his dialogue to Phaedrus. But I just want to mention that's a critical thing in devotion to wisdom, but the way one learns that is through the guidance and adjustment of the spiritual guru. And, as we're told, any aspirant, serious student of theosophy will come under the attention of the Mahaprabhu. And whether they know it or not, they get help.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, we have a question from Jonathan.
I was wondering if I could actually stand up there and read
Please.
something from BP Wadia.
Okay.
Along these lines.
Beautiful.
Just for a second. Yeah.
Just on this idea of realigning the inverted mind. And I think, Robert, you mentioned in your presentation about there's something to the effect that the lower mind becomes passive to the higher mind, something like that. The magnetism moves in that direction instead of the normal direction of the other way around, right?
Yeah.
But the realignment, and this is something from Wadia that is actually in the same issue of Hermes as the Gemini article. And as you will remember, those Hermes issues kind of had a current, as you say, going through each issue, you could say, or like a Sutratmic kind of theme going through them. And in 1922, Wadia wrote an article called, let me see what it's called, The Inner Ruler. And the Hermes, they took in July 1977 issue, they took a large extract from that and they called it Serving the Masters. And so this is Wadia talking about HPV. Let me, okay. And this is HPV exemplifying this idea of discipleship and devotion, according to Wadia. Remember HPV's wonderful description of herself as a disciple. Quote, I'm a window through which the light comes, unquote. Back to Wadia. Discipleship, according to HPV, is a matter of difference in direction of the flow of life currents. It assumes the capacity in people for allowing themselves to be flooded by the sunlight of life and recognizing themselves as mere windows. It is not so much a privilege as a great responsibility, and its recognition grows with the growth of discipleship. Our attitude should be one of thankfulness that we are or may become windows through which the sunlight pours, and that there are souls willing to receive that sunlight. The disciple, then, must be the friend of all creatures. His life is open and broad, a life of bliss. He is ready to take in hand any work that the master wants done. It does not matter to him whether he sweeps a floor or whether he delivers a lecture. He also learns to realize the fine truth, quote, "They also serve who only stand and wait," unquote. I think that's Milton. We must be patient enough to wait, patient enough and big enough to understand the outside world from the master's point of view. And that only comes when we get rid of our anxiety to save the world. We are constantly trying to clear up other people's jungles instead of our own. And we find a difficulty in that they will not let us do it. Why should they? They have their own job to do. Ours, the task of becoming windows for the light, which others may gladly use in the purifying of their own natures, in illuminating their own minds and hearts. Thank you.
Wow, thanks, Jonathan. Hmm.
Well, that was just beautiful. Thanks, Jonathan. I guess that we will, do we have any more questions? Ken, yes, please,
Pop up there.
come.
Okay.
Thank you, Robert. I enjoyed that immensely. All the different aspects, starting with the astronomy. And I didn't realize that Castor was actually 6 different stars. Part of the correlation is, I think, with the Atascarana, the lower Manas and the higher Manas getting linked together. And I forget which of the 2 twins in the Purnarvasu, which was the guru and which was the higher and the lower, which was which? Was Castor the Buddhi Manas or the Kama Manas?
Well, Pollux is the Buddhi Manas.
Pollux, okay.
So,
and that to the question.
like in what,
Yes.
that's just one way, one interpretation, right, is Pollux is Buddhi Manas and Castor is Kama Manas. That's just one way of looking at it.
And that leads me to the question you mentioned, could there be a significance to the 6, the 3 binary stars?
Yeah.
And I was thinking if the septenary nature of man and humanity is considered that there really are 6 principles and that our Lingashvara, the 7th one, is really not a principle at all, then maybe those other 6 could be Castor, in our Mayavic sort of manifested world, could represent us as humans, and hence the 6 principles. Does that seem like a possible correlation with the Castor having 6 stars?
Yeah, I was struck by something like, this is obviously pure speculation.
Yes.
But it is interesting, isn't it? That not only are there 6 stars, but there are 3 binaries. So that's like the 3 bodies of Taraka Raja Yoga, right? So, and then the 7th, the synthetic, is they all come together and look as one. So there may be something to it.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to mention that. Thanks.
Fantastic. Well, we have a question from Miss Diane Martin. Unmute yourself.
Yes,
Yeah.
I wonder if you could say a little more about the seventh impulsion that Robert Moore, I think, was reading from an article.
Well, did you, in terms of like who was involved or?
Well, we got HPV, the sixth impulsion, and we know there's got to be a seventh. There absolutely you can't have just six of anything of this magnitude just hanging there.
Well, the seventh impulsion was 1963 to 2000.
Right. And we're to figure that out with our own intuition.
Well, I guess it, for those of us that worked with Ragavan, which, well, it's like working with a tidal wave. Yeah, talk about an impulsion. Jeez. But, to think about it, when I was thinking about it, and I think about it in relation to what we see now, is whenever you have an impulsion of light, you'll always get a reaction from the darkness, right? Because we live in a manifested world of duality. So we had this tremendous impulsion to wake up humanity. And we see that in many areas, humanity is waking up all over it. These impulsions are not limited purely to theosophical objective movement that you can see. It involves the entire globe in all kinds of aspects of it in millions of ways. But one of the things that Sri Raghavan said was that what was being precipitated was a moment of choice for human beings. That accelerating the choice of like, are you going to join humanity on its pilgrimage, or are you going to be trying to erode its evolution? And it seems like now that selfishness, those are craving power, wealth, the ability to manipulate, to separate themselves out, that they feel threatened. And there's a desperation over the globe to reassert itself. And that would just be one way of interpreting contemporary events. Judy?
Yes, thank you, Robert. I just wanted to add to that I think in some sense we have to say that the impetus of the ULT itself is the seventh impulsion. The fact that we are all here together after so much. I mean, Raghavan, Nandini Iyer, B.P. Wadia, Robert Crosby gave us very much after Blavatsky and Judge in the 1875 cycle. But we can be grateful for the ULT in that we are here together and that we are carrying the ball now. And we realize that it is we and each one of us that must do it and not depend on an external guru, that the guru is in ourselves. So thank you for your talk.
Yeah, the guru is omnipresent, right? I mean, just like our self is omnipresent.
Yes.
And you're not, well, to really appreciate any guru, you have to, like we mentioned right from the beginning, you have to go to the inner plane. Like, for instance, Ramana Maharshi, who a well-recognized sage in India, who now has an ashram, he used to teach people by silence. That was his best way. And then when that failed, he'd actually speak. But the real teaching came in silence.
Beautiful. I'm reminded of a statement that I heard over and over again in some spiritual circles, that the guru is not a person. Ultimately, we're to remember that it's not a person, but it is indeed the guiding force of evolution. So however it may manifest in one's life, keeping that idea, I think, is a measure of freedom. But do we have another question? Okay. Well, thank you so very much, Robert, for a great presentation. We'd like to remind everybody that next week, the 22nd, is ULT Day. A presentation will be given to us by Mr. Elton Hall, and we hope that you'll come and be with us. Like Dr. Judy said, hey, ULT is a force of reckoning for us as well. So thank you very much for that comment. And everybody have a great week ahead. Come back and be with us.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
thank
much,
you.
Robert.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Robert.
Right.
Thanks,
Namaste.
Robert.